Hi, Bill.
Hi.
How's it go? How's it going?
Good, good. Yeah, we moved. If I had thought about it, I would have done a little bit of cleanup the boxes, but it's okay.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that view, but it's not about me today, but about you. And I said it before. I would appreciate to do a interview with you, and we chatted earlier. I don't know, half a year ago, or was it?
It was a while ago, yeah. I'm not
a while
sure.
ago, yeah. But yeah, you're one of the most prolific colorists out there, and one of the most well-known for sure. I'm
sorry. Hold on. I got a fan calling me.
I just to
oh wow,
don't get you away with your false modesty.
It's not false. I think that I have a decent idea of what I'm doing as a colorist, but I feel like I have a hard time finding as much work as I would like to. So yeah, it's not false modesty. It's genuinely like I wish I were more prolific and famous. Not famous, about that, but I wish I had an easier time getting work sometimes.
Yeah, but your name is on many books. When one says Crabtree, okay, there are at least one or two books on the shelf with your name on it. This is The Damned. I just downloaded, as I said, the pictures on your website. What's it? crabtreecolor.com.
Wow, that's a very I have not updated that at all. It's fine. It's one of those things where, you know, people say you need to have a website. So I have a website, but I don't use it. I might as well not have a website.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I meant with that's genuine modesty, because where's Berserk? Did you? Yeah. Okay, when you haven't updated it.
Inept and lazy to have it up there. Modesty doesn't even come into it. It's just I just, you know, I'm a little bit of a generation that this is all just kind of not that interesting and important to, you know. You know, the whole, I mean, I'm on Instagram because I actually found it really helpful in trying to get work. But if I didn't need it for work, I would have already gotten rid of my Instagram account. I have and don't use a Twitter account, and I've actually shut down my Facebook account. I'm not interested in social media and all of that garbage. But then again, you know, I mean, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met Jamie if it weren't for YouTube and stuff. So, you know, it definitely has its value, but you know.
Yeah. I definitely like this little YouTube bubble, but really I'm with you on I'm an old guy who I still have no smartphone. I don't phone with my mobile. Mobile is just for recording my YouTube videos. Yeah, what's your idea of good coloring? I haven't can see it in your work. What differs from pages that were colored by other colorists? But what's your idea of good coloring?
Well, I think that there's sort of two. I don't know. I haven't actually thought about this, so I don't want it to come across as I actually have this policy. But as you ask me the question, I think there's kind of two things. One of them is your job, and then the other one is kind of to the extent that you want to have a little flair. So, like, your job is to, you know, your job is to serve the story. You know, when I first contemplated getting into comics, I thought of it as, you know, you're just doing a bunch of single images, and you know, it's sort of like, instead of doing one painting, you're doing several. And you know, that I was only thinking about it in terms of making it beautiful. But what I realized pretty quickly was that that's not true, because everything in the comic is, or should be, in service of a story. That's the thing. Comics are not, I think some people do approach comics, I mean creators, as, you know, either from a point of view of film or television, or a novel, or a bunch of still images. Those are all not how it actually ought to work. Comics ought to be, they ought to work, you know, on their own strengths, on their own the particularities of the way the medium actually works. So I feel like a lot of, like, one thing I see a lot of times is stuff where there'll be a scene and it's a static camera for multiple panels on a page, and I for me, that is like someone that's thinking in terms of film or television that doesn't understand how a comic book actually works. Because to me, that's so dull. It doesn't propel your eye at all. So to me, like, you can't, anyway, I'm getting really off the topic. So
no.
The number one job you have is to tell a story. Right? So, like, you know, I mean, that interview that you kind of quoted me on before, where I said clarify, I do think, as much as I don't want to repeat myself, like, I do think that's probably the most all-encompassing term, because you're trying to make the picture clear, in terms of, like, visually legible. Like, if I don't know if you're going to have this Hellboy image on the screen later, but if you look at that, if you look at that picture, there's in the middle panel, you know, the characters further back are kind of successively more similar in hue to the background, so that, you know, your eye is drawn to Hellboy. And actually, as I'm looking at this page, I don't think I did a very good job in that first panel of making it. I think I should have maybe made the background even lighter, and possibly put the foreground figures in a more monochromatic, darker color range. I don't think I did enough in that panel to make it clear that the character with the suit on is the subject of the panel. Now, seeing it, I don't think I did a good job there. So anyway, so there's that element of it, right? But then there's also the element of what's the weather like? What's the time of day? Where are we? Or how does it feel? So, like, you know, there could be a slight sense of melancholy, or there could be a sense of coldness. Oh wow, I don't even remember doing that. Yeah, well, that was like a tryout for a job I did not get.
To be honest with you, I don't like these hues too much. These, you know what I mean? With the cape, these shades, the grades is maybe the right better term.
Yeah. Well, you're
some colorists are overdoing it.
For sure.
You're not one of these,
but you still don't like it.
No.
That's fair. I think that's. I think there's a real. I think there's a real contradiction or confusion within comic books about what are we trying to do. You know, you have this image that you've intentionally, and I've heard you refer to it. You're the only people I've ever heard refer to it, where you are intentionally making an image flat. When you draw in black, and you use black for elements in the foreground and elements in the background, you are making a flat image in terms of you are not availing yourself of the tools that you could be using to create convincing illusionistic space. Period. And there's this weird thing where, you know, I feel like the artist in their bringing up the drawing are bringing it up in terms of, many of them are bringing it up in terms of volume as a sculptural form in pencil. Then they're intentionally taking that information and using it as a basis for a much flatter, more graphic drawing that in some ways is disregarding the attempt at genuine illusionistic rendering. In terms of in favor of something that's more graphic and stylish and is less about tricking your eye into thinking it's looking at an actual object. You know? And then you're handing it off to a colorist whose job it is to then go back in and add all of the sculptural form that you removed. And it's just I feel like it doesn't know what it wants to be. And some of these things you're showing here are me trying to get a job. So they're not necessarily me approaching it in a way that I think is best. It's me approaching it in a way that I think is best, but in conjunction with me trying to do something that I think they want. So
yes. So what is it what you want actually?
I don't honestly. I'm so far from any sort of ability to. Okay, I like this.
It's from static.
Yes. Yeah. They ended up having to go with a different colorist just because the budget was so low on this that I couldn't do it. I wanted to do it, but
yeah, that's the question that I had because I have static over there, and I looked it up because I didn't connect it with your name, and it was some Italian, but this looks really cool.
Yeah. So what happened there was, this was at the height of my inability to find work. A couple years ago, I pretty much had to break into comics again. And so at this time, I was really using Instagram to try to find people to collaborate with, so to speak, artists that would want to work with me. And one of the things that I came to realize was it's kind of pointless for me to kind of cold call editors and say, hey, got any work? Because they're always going to be like, I'll keep you in mind, but they're going to give the work to the same colorist that they're already working with. They're not going to make room for you in their roster unless the artist asks them to. So I kind of realized that what I should be doing, instead of trying to approach editors, is I should be approaching artists. And I came across the work of Matt Lesniewski and thought, this guy is really on his way to being something pretty big. And I really liked his work, and I felt like he should be bigger than he was, but maybe that was a good opportunity for me to try to kind of get in on the ground floor, so to speak. So, and I had also, well, anyway, so I was at a point where I had so much free time because I couldn't get hired, that I was able to do things sort of just as a kind of, you know, just to sort of show my work. And so, and he was working on this book on his own, and he didn't have a publisher. So I colored several pages of it for free, and then just sent them to people. Like I sent some to Eric Stevenson at Image. And I also sent some to Matt Kent and Daniel Shaban, who is an editor at Dark Horse. And I had done something several years ago with Matt. I'd work with Daniel here and there as I could, you know, as he offered me work. And I was like, hey, have you seen this guy's stuff? This is really cool. And they were kind of like, yeah, it's cool, it's cool. And nothing came of it. And then months later, and then at some point, Dark Horse offered Matt a very modest budget to publish Static, and it was not something that I could, as much as I wanted to work with him at any cost, I couldn't commit myself to the amount of time it would take to color this book properly for the amount of money that they could afford for the budget. So that's why it's colored pages by me that exist, but that they never made it into print. And then months later, somehow Matt Kent never saw or registered that email I had sent to him. But then Daniel Shaban, editor at Dark Horse, said, hey, what do you think about working with this guy? And showed him Matt Lesniewski's work again. And Matt Kent was like, oh, this is great. Let's definitely, I want to do something with this guy. So they set in motion the project Crimson Flower, and actually had a different colorist attached to it. And then Matt Lesniewski was like, well, is it possible for Bill to color it? Yeah. And Matt Kent was like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, did you guys not, I tried to set you guys up with Matt Lesniewski months ago, and it somehow didn't register. But anyhow, it all worked out for the best. So that was sort of the beginning of my working with Matt Kent again. And he's been incredible in terms of really advocating for me and trying to get work for me. Yeah, I mean, obviously BRZRKR was a big life-changing thing that I got the opportunity because of him and stuff. I'm actually a big fan of Ron Garney, and I feel that he's the kind of artist that, you know, the sort of conventional approach really is not in line with what he's doing. You know, so that's another whole component of what makes, you know, good color is trying to kind of match the coloring the sort of the drawing language of the color to the drawing language, the line art.
I liked actually Berserk, at least the one issue that I have, and the colors as well. But it was not a story that I want to go along with for long. It's just it was just the story, and when I made a bit fun of it was because of this huge event thing, because Keanu was involved and in some way. This here is from. Is this colored by you? Yeah. This is maybe an example. I think it matches the comic, but it creates volumes.
Right.
Here, maybe it fits. It suits the purpose, but in other comics, when you have very simple line work and it's, as you said, it flatter, maybe meant to be flat, and then some colorist comes along with light, artificial light sources and so on, and then it's the point where I would say, hey, come on, put all the colors away. This is But
well, this was another thing that was me trying to get work.
Okay,
put it away. Me selling out.
No.
You know, there is something for me. There's something tempting or compelling about just as an artist. There's something about trying to understand, especially because you're not really working from reference, right? You're just you're faking your way through how light would fall on a form and stuff. So there's a thing where even though it may or may not be best serving the art or the story, there's something that's really enjoyable and compelling about attempting to understand light and shadow and form and volume and that kind of thing. And so I do enjoy working in that style broadly. Not necessarily the full on, super, shiny, super glowing, everything has highlight. But like this right here that you're showing here is still adding a fair amount of description of the form that's not in the drawing. It's implied by the drawing. But it is trying to kind of use the drawing as a starting point for an additional layer of sort of sculptural description.
And it works, I would say. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's it's always tempting to try to talk about things in a way where you have a policy about something, you have a philosophy about something, and it's very kind of like, I've decided this is how it ought to be, but the reality is, things often are more sort of a case by case. So it's kind of like, you could do it this way or you could do it that way, and there's a successful way of doing it in either mode, and a lot of times, you got to go with what the artist themselves wants. If they want you to try to render their forms, you should. You shouldn't. Act like better. So yeah, that's a big and with someone like Ron Garney as a good example, where it's like there's very strong mark making in there. So it's sort of like, how can you try to have things that maybe echo or feel in the same drawing language within the color, or you know, that I think that's definitely, you know, you know, finding a way to make things that are sort of sympathetic to the drawing in some way.
Yeah. Did you get color advice? Did he painted his drawings on some Xerox copy or something
No,
to let you know how you should do it?
No, early on, at the very beginning, we had, you know, kind of like a back and forth in terms of, you know, I kind of did stuff to the, you know, colored a few pages, and then he had feedback, and then, you know, I kind of made some adjustments, and then like that. You know, you ideally, you know, you want to try to get that stuff ironed out early so that you're not still having to make changes as much as over the course of the book, you know. So yeah, I think he likes it now, but I never know.
Are there artists that are extremely picky, or editors that are more picky than others?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want me to name names? No.
I mean,
no. Some editors are very hands-off. Other editors are very hands-on. And if they're, the way I feel about it all is sort of like, if they're giving me feedback that is, you know, good, then I want it. If they're suggesting changes that are for the better, then that's good. You know, I mean, I don't relish, you know, having to like kind of go back and rework everything I do. And there have been times where I felt like I had just sort of lost my, there have been times where I had so much kind of back and forth with a given artist that I sort of lost my way, where I was sort of kind of like what I mentioned earlier, where it's like, it's kind of like if you do the first thing that occurs to you, and then someone says, no, not like that, not like that. And then you do the second thing that occurs to you. No, more like this. There's a point where you're sort of like, I don't know anymore what, I'm not reacting naturally anymore. I'm doing what I think you are thinking. You know, I'm trying to get in someone else's headspace, and I'm questioning and doubting my own decision making on a level that can get to a point where I just feel lost. You know, there's I have no true north anymore.
Yeah.
You know, my compass is useless, because every time I go off of my compass, you're telling me I'm going the wrong way. So I have been in those situations, and I've been in those situations enough times that I sort of, when it's possible, I will try to get out of them once I recognize them as being that, you know, because it's just not, it's not good for anybody. It's not good for my confidence. The artist would be happier with somebody else.
You mentioned Matt Kind as being very supportive, and I try to continue with the question of which editors or artists are maybe the best. Do you have some other names with who you can recommend to work with as a colorist? Well,
yeah, you know, I think it honestly, to the extent that it's possible, it's good to be friends with the people you work with, or at least to have a functioning level of you know, amicability. I think it helps. I really do. And I would add to that, people who respect what a colorist does. I think that somewhat understandably, I think there's some. I think the role of colorist has changed a lot because of what's possible. Where, you know, 35 years ago or something, the colorist's role was kind of seen as kind of an afterthought, sort of like a, you know, we just need somebody to do this. It doesn't matter, you know. But, you know, particularly with the advent of computer coloring, even though, yes, some of it is garish and overdone, it as the technology gets better, as the techniques get better, there does become more and more of a possibility of doing something that doesn't look like it was colored on a computer. And anyhow, I think that the role of a colorist is, you know, depending on who you're working with, they might have a greater or lesser regard for what they see as, you know, your role, or the extent to which they feel like you are a contributor and a collaborator. And I think that even now, some people feel like colorists are not very important, or you know, I will see things where people kind of refer to the colorist and the letterer sort of in the same breath, and I don't want to disrespect letterers, but especially in the age of computer lettering, where a lot of what you're doing is basically balloon placement, which is a craft. And there are letterers, for instance, Clem Robbins, who is the letterer on BRZRKR, who make their own fonts. Clem has actually made a font where it will randomly cycle through you know, the 5 versions of a given letter that he's made. So it's all computer done, but it's creating some, they're all hand done letters to begin with, and it's cycling through them, so it's not using the same A every time. It is a strange thing, you know, like I do, and you see a lot of this lately, I do sometimes do use a layer that emulates a paper texture. You know, a lot of people are commenting on, not a lot, but, you know, some people have commented on that mind management bootleg issue that I colored being on newsprint. And I don't know, but I think possibly part of that perception has to do with the paper itself, and part of it has to do with the visual perception that I'm using a layer of a scan of a piece of watercolor paper.
Yeah.
So, you know, philosophically, it's definitely questionable to me. What am I doing? Why am I pretending that I'm coloring on this other thing when I'm not? And it's this weird, but on the other hand, it makes me realize that coloring comics digitally in general is a strange thing, because you're on it's such a specific circumstance that you would have something so pristine and so uniform that doing something to kind of fight that isn't necessarily I think ultimately it assists in giving a little, the way that it makes the color break up, I think it looks better. So it's sort of like, yeah, philosophically it's very questionable to be you know, going to those lengths to pretend that you're using actual artist materials when in fact you're doing it all on a computer. Yes. I can certainly I I can certainly see the argument for why that's a really questionable decision. But I also feel like when you do paint on or draw on actual paper, the texture of the paper assists in creating that sort of optical blending phenomenon that exists in a lot of painting, where it's, and if you look at someone's skin up close, it's not clean, it's not smooth, the transitions are not, so it is kind of false. But then again, like, it's in some ways it's more sort of true to life, as far as, you know, when we see things in the world, we see them slightly grainy compared to like an HD television that's showing everything in this like hyper clarity. That's false in its own way. So it's kind of like we're at a point now because of technology where trying to be a purist is a little bit of a fool's errand.
Yeah.
Because there's not much pure. You know, I mean, we can't go back. We can't go back to whatever time when things were done the way they should be. You know, like, he's coloring on the line art. So he's responsible for the scan, you know, and that's why I just didn't know, and I don't know because I haven't seen it. I would have to see the digital files to know if the blurriness is because the paper can't handle the ink load or what. But I will say this. I feel like I am constantly kind of having, I don't know if you know the idiom, having the rug pulled out from under me.
Yeah.
As a colorist, and I'm not alone in this, as publishers struggle to find ways to save money, and it's not greed, comics do not sell very well. So it's really, you know, especially single issues. Like, I understand, like, a lot of people like you and Damien, like, feel like, well, we're the ones supporting this, why are you shortchanging us? But it's like, the budget is so low. Comics at this point are only kind of sustainable because of film and television. So they're trying everything they can to get this thing printed and done so that maybe if it gets reprinted later and there's a TV show, it can actually profit. So anyhow, I'm constantly like disappointed when I see stuff in print where it's just like, it's like not even like, I worked on a book called Refrigerator Full of Heads, and it was for DC. It was Joe Hill's Hill House Comics imprint or whatever, and I'm using, you know, just about as vivid color as is possible in terms of, you know, I'm using very saturated red and whatnot. And then when I get the comic, and it actually looks more vivid on the screen than it does in real life, it's just like, it's so disappointing when you're trying to make like a screaming red, and it's just like, it's just not, it's basically not possible to do that on the paper that's being used. So it's like there's a perception of like what, you know, what your coloring choices are by the reader, by the, you know, but it's like, it's just not even, you know, it's kind of like your range used to be like this, your dynamic range of your color, and then with newer paper, it's like this.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do. You know, they try to act like, oh, well, are you sure you're using the right settings? Maybe if you can't give me like a 90-90, like the CMYK values. Remember in that Kelly Jones book where it showed some of the actual out in the margin, the colorist was writing the values in your Kelly Jones artist edition.
Yeah.
That's what you still are doing. I mean, you aren't doing it out in the margins, but you're designating the printing values of these colors. So like if you're doing like a really vivid red and you do like 100 magenta, that's as much magenta as you can call for. You can't get more. And if you're doing 100 magenta, 90 yellow or something like that to get like a really bright red. And then when it prints, it's just kind of like, there's nothing, it's really frustrating. It's very frustrating.
But actually, I really don't buy this, that comics don't make enough money to put out decent books, because especially in the US, I think, with English books that you can sell all over the world. Because we have here such a small industry. I really hate this term industry, but it's, I guess, we have little publishers who put out these books with colors that pop with no end. Yeah. And almost with no buyers around. Maybe editions sell runs of 1,000. In the US, you would number them all, but here it's more or less the usual. And these publishers, they survive somehow. And of course, these are very small business usually, just with one boss and one manager and maybe one other guy or lady, and they keep the outfit running. But somehow it's possible, and when you see what they manage here in a language that nobody reads comics in. I mean, how many German comic readers there are? Very little. And even in Scandinavia and Sweden, there are even less Swedish people. You have fantastic books. And so it's always a question what a publisher says, we can do this or not, and what really would be possible, maybe.
I think maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. I mean, I think that there's a few things to consider. It is definitely a question of what kind of staff does the publisher have. At this point, what you really need as a creator is you need to be distributed and available on a level that people can find your work. The number one thing a publisher does is they advance you money, right? Very few creators can afford to do X amount of work before getting paid for any of it. So like, you know, that's the big thing. Is like they're advancing you. I mean, depending on what we're talking about. Are we talking about creator owned? Are we talking about something where there's like a somewhat of a page rate and a split of ownership? Or are we talking about, you know, working on Batman where it's like you might get some small amount of royalties, but you are basically doing work for hire. And, you know, if you're doing work for Marvel or DC, like, yeah, they've got a whole office of staff. But I think also they're having to justify their existence on a daily basis to these multimedia giants that own them. And I can almost guarantee you that someone at, you know, Disney or whoever owns, you know, Marvel and DC have both been bought by like media giants. I guarantee you there's someone in those companies that's looking at the comics themselves and saying, why are we doing this? This is almost, we're almost losing money on this. Or it's so close, like that it's like, why are we even doing it? And every time you see, you know, one of these companies get bought, then the first thing that happens is a bunch of layoffs. A bunch of the office staff loses their jobs. So I don't know, you know, the specific numbers and everything, but I know that, you know, back when I was working on Invincible, it was kind of like, if we could sell about 5,000 copies, we were just about breaking even in terms of being able to pay. The way Image works is they charge you a flat fee as a publisher. That's tacked on top of the cost of actually printing the comic. So anything after that is the creative team's to share however they've arranged that. By the time you get up to about 15,000 copies, you can make a pretty good living. And it goes up from there. By the time you're selling 30,000 copies, it's like printing money. Now, you know, but also, like, at this point, like 15,000 copies for Marvel or DC, if it's not one of their like marquee titles, that's not bad. They'll at least I don't know about Marvel. They might have, I don't know, but I know their big books still sell like in the 6 figures. But yeah, they're like running an entire office of people that all get salaries, you know, and yeah, it's ridiculous. It's an outmoded situation for sure. But the basic problem is that to create these books, someone needs to be able to earn a living while they create them. And what tends to be the way things are budgeted is that they use the single issues to pay for the creation of the books. And then generally the book will get reprinted unless the sales are really abysmal. And then at that point, hopefully it begins to generate some profit. So I don't know. I don't think it's quite as, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it costs these bigger companies in terms of, you know, their overhead. But, you know, comics don't sell great and there isn't a lot of money there. So I would imagine, you know, if you have a large office of staff, it could get expensive real quick. The thing is, like, you don't really need that. But how is a multimedia, you know, giant gonna have a skeleton crew, you know, running their operations when it's like, you know, they're so vested in these characters as, like, you know, basically licensed properties. Like, somebody has to be like making sure this is anyway. I all of that to say, I don't think it's as easy as people think it is to
I didn't want to
reprinting in another language something that's already been paid for.
Yeah, we have here publishers who publish new stuff by artists, but I guess it's almost impossible to live by your own creations over here. They get a bit of money, but the biggest pay they get is to get their work published. That's the sad reality over here. And you have all these guys who produce graphic novels working 3 to 4 years for one book, and then it's out, and then they get a bit of money, but you can't go have a living with that.
Yeah.
I don't. It's actually wrong to compare the situations.
It's feast or
agree.
famine. At least as I'm aware of it, comics is feast or famine. I feel like art is a very selfish endeavor.
Yeah.
And it should be.
Mm.
I think if people get something out of it, that's a happy byproduct. But I feel like, I don't know. I mean, you just by being happy, you contribute a lot to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Being unhappy, you're contributing to the toxic environment that's here. Yeah. So if you can find a way to be a happy and fulfilled person, that's a big contribution, you know, and
that's, yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like with art, you should be, if you can be, you should be very self-indulgent, you know?
Mm.
It's art.
Yeah.
It's pointless. It's not pointless. I mean, it's very it's very, very frivolous pursuit, right? But it's everything. Like, you know, it's everything in the world, but to me, but I'm self-indulgent person. So, you know, so it works out great. But I don't do it for other people. You know what I mean? I do it for me. And if someone likes it, that's really great. But, you know, yeah, I'm a big fan of art that's gives me insight into someone's inner workings, right? So I'm not interested in art that's like for an audience.
Yeah, that's not art at all, if you ask me, usually.
Right. Yeah. So
that's art like these maybe Salvador Dali epigones, if you know what I mean.
Salvador Dali what?
These painters who do new surrealism, maybe in a very perfect way and like it's done before. Artists that just want to impress with their skills. They do it for an audience sometimes. And yeah, okay. Yeah, art is difficult, and but no, it's simple at the same time.
Yeah, it's the only thing.
When you feel honesty and some kind of in German it would be Dringlichkeit, something when it's urgent for you. When you feel that something was urgent for the artist to do this, then it's interesting, maybe.
I think there's
if it wasn't urgent for the artist, if it was just something he did, it's maybe or probably not so interesting.
I think there's a trick to it. I mean trick. I don't mean like deceit. I mean, it's like, you remember when you were a kid and you couldn't figure out how to whistle? And then one day you
still can't.
I still can't, but I kind of can, right? Okay. There's a trick to it, right? I think being an artist is like that. There's a trick to it. And the trick is getting in sync with your own interior world. That's it. That's the whole trick. And if you don't have that interior world, or you don't know how to get in sync with it, then you can't be an artist, because you don't,
that's probably what I meant with honesty.
Yeah, I remember hearing about Bob Dylan said something in an interview when he had finally like gotten off of drugs, and for a while he like couldn't write because the songs used to just come to him, and they weren't doing that anymore. And I think eventually he found a way to do it again. But I feel like, you know, as an artist, you don't actually have it's like you have a box and you open up the box and see what's in there, and that's it. If there's nothing in there, you're out of luck. But if you're lucky, there's stuff in there when you look, and that's it. That's all there is. That's all. That's the whole thing to it, I think. And also, like, just believing that if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, that something will be there. You know? Like, did you ever see that? The third Indiana Jones movie, The Last Crusade?
Probably I have, but I'm totally bad with remembering.
It's the one with Sean Connery in it.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever.
If there was just one Sean Connery, with Sean Connery, I probably have seen it. Yeah.
Okay, so at the very end, they're trying to find the Holy Grail. At the very end, there's this chasm, and he basically has to walk across it, and you know, it's like a leap of faith, basically, except he's not leaping, he's walking. And the way that they do it, I'm always confused by the orientation of this. Okay, the way that they film it, it's like every time, right when his foot is about to make contact, the stone becomes visible. And I think that's how creative. I think that's the creative process. You can never see any farther ahead of you than just like that moment right before you actually make impact, but you kind of have to just believe it will be there when you get there. That comment I left you last night is very close to my heart about Charles Burns and David Lynch.
Okay. Yeah.
That realm of exploring the realms of association and how certain things evoke feelings in us and impressions and things are larger than life, but like a dream and everything. That's my whole. I love that more than anything. World. Except, you know, my family and stuff. That's everything.
Maybe this would be a good end statement, last sentence. Just when I edit this video, and then we say goodbye and goodbye.
Auf Wiedersehen.
No, perfect. Okay.